Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another video with Swaggle. And in this video, we have to talk about our silver and bronze age indexes. Of course, I owe you guys an update. We are in the month of November, which means we have the data to look at for October. So in this video, we're going to kind of go over, what's going on in the market, where are we at now, where are we going in the future, and we have to talk about how no book is immune to a correction, which I think is very, very interesting because we have some mega grails to also talk about as they relate to, sort of the index and what we're seeing overall in the trend line. But before I get into the video, if you guys drop me a like or a comment or subscribe if you're enjoying the content, helps support the channel, doing those things, I would appreciate it. But let us get into this video here today. Now, before I truly get into it, I do want to do a little bit of a preface here. I made this index so that we can kind of go over some of the data together and kind of take, tabs on what's happening in the market. My overall goal of this is to give us the tools to identify what might be good prices when we're out there thinking about picking up comic books ourselves. I think if we can start to see some of the trends, see some of, the returns on how these books are performing, then we can really start to identify what target prices might be good for buy-ins, especially in these coming months with everything going on in the economy. So kind of want to get that out of the way. Hopefully you guys find this thing helpful and informative in making your own comic book purchasing decisions. But here it is right here, the comic book index. It is the top 100 sold books per age, both silver and bronze. I take the highest volume of graded book within regards to those 100. I use that as the data I pull from. I take the final sale of every month, average that all together, get that data from GPA, and we kind of have the value of the index that we have in front of us. So this was kind of where we were at last month in September of 2022, the Silver Age Index. As you can see, we started all the way back in 2018. We did have in this last little month a bit of a bounce off of the floor. In August, we were at 58,000. September, we kind of jumped up to 59,000. And now we are in October. Where did we go from here? Well, we went back on the slide down to 55,406. But it's not too bad overall, even though we're still going down. This is a less of a percentage drop than in prior times where we've had major drops. If we rewind the clock back to the beginning of the year in February, we can see that we were at that sort of $90,000 range. And then when we had that drop in the next month, we dropped down to the $80,000 range. And then we had the next big drop. We went to the $70,000, and then we went to the $67,000, and then we went to the $50,000. And kind of where we are now, yes, we are, still going down overall, but we're kind of finding this window, which I think is a very good sign. I still believe that by the time we get to the end of this video, I'll express to you where I think we will be. I still think we have a little bit to fall as far as the percentage value of the index is concerned in order for us to fall back into the trend line. But generally speaking, the falls are going to be much, much smaller, at least, if the theory holds up. Of course, everything can go to zero. We can totally fall through the floor and the comic book market and everything in the entire world could totally crash. That is always on the table. But the drops, generally speaking, I think are going to be smaller for the next month or so as we kind of continue on looking at this index. But let's jump ahead to the Bronze Age Index as well. One of the things I think is interesting about analyzing the Bronze Age is since we have such a high volume of sales, there are so many more books on the census, you can get a much more accurate view of the data. Whereas in the Silver Age, you might only have one sale per month, so the swings can be pretty big. Whereas in the Bronze Age, you're typically going to have, multiple sales to pull from. And as we can see from the top of 2021, or at least in the April month of 2021, we were at the height of the market. We've basically been on a very, very even decline throughout the course of this last, year and a half or so. And this has been especially true since the beginning of the year, where you could see that we started at $65,000. We had a big drop to $58,000. And then every single month after that, we've kind of had a slow and steady kind of, I think like 5 to 10%, pretty consistent drop month to month. So where are we now going from September to October? Well, we kind of had another drop again, but, we're really starting to kind of find that floor overall. You can see that the curve of this graph is actually starting to even out a little bit. That's not to say that this particular graph is drawn to scale, so you can't take too much stock into that. But generally speaking, going from 51,400 to 50,700 is almost a negligible difference for the most part. Now, I still think the Bronze Age is going to come down even more as we can kind of continue out for the next couple months. But I also do think that it's possible that, we could just sort of hold the floor at this particular range for the next say 5 months or whatever it is, and then like basically start to go back up again once the trend line would be pushing us there organically anyway. So there's sort of no way to really know where we're going to go other than we think that at a certain point we should be kind of hitting back to what we should have been hitting based on what the data was showing us, all the way back from 2018 to 2019 to 2020. But here are the two graphs side by side. One of the things I think is interesting to look at these two graphs as they go side by side is that, if we rewind the clock back to 2018 and 19, you can see that the value ranges of these indexes were pretty similar overall. I think silver was generally always a bit more valuable in terms of the books that we're pulling from. And, in 2021 and even early 2022, the spread was pretty wide, but now that spread is starting to shrink a little bit more, which, kind of suggests to me that we are getting back to a quote unquote normal or an average that kind of makes sense now that we're past all this sort of 2021 printing money craziness. Here are some of the key kind of data points from this month to month side by side here. For Silver Age, we went from 59,000 to 55,000. It is a decrease of 7.4%, which might seem like a lot, but again, kind of to reiterate, the 7% drop is not as big as some of the other percent drops that we've seen in prior months. And, the things can be really, really swingy in the Silver Age. I mean, we're talking about, maybe missing one sale in our index, and that could have, had our month be almost even to the last month. I mean, we're talking about, a couple $1,000s here. So all it takes is one kind of big book, one kind of big sale to kind of have a very competitive, healthy thing in the market for that decreased percentage to not look so bad. Similarly, here in the Bronze Age, you can see we went from 51,000 to 50,000, a decrease of 0.8%, pretty negligible overall, which is kind of encouraging because it feels like we are starting to find that floor. Now, the key takeaways, some of the things I think are interesting to talk about is, just because our indexes are going down in value or correcting back down in value doesn't necessarily mean that all books are dropping or all books are performing poorly. For instance, when we dig into the kind of book by book comparisons from month to month, in the Silver Age, you have 37% of the books of the 100 that have gone down in value this month, yet you have 31% of the books that have actually gone up in value this month. And then you have 32%, which, generally speaking, are kind of a push. Either it was a negligible amount that they went down or up, or is it exactly the same amount? But generally speaking, you have a third of the books that go down, a third of the books that go up, and a third of the books that stay the same. And I would say that that's pretty healthy overall, probably what the average you would expect to see out of any given month for these indexes, even though the overall index is trending downwards. Similarly, with the Bronze Age books, we do see a few more going down here, 37% down, 26% up, and then 37% push, which is, it suggests to me that I do think that some of the Bronze Age stuff still is coming down a little bit more frequently than the Silver Age stuff, simply due to the census. You're going to have more sales, there's going to be more downward pressure, there's going to be more incentive for people to undercut everyone else out there in the market, where the Silver Age ones, it really is a matter of who is selling at that particular time and who is trying to buy at that particular time. Now, before we move on to future predictions and talk a little bit about the mega grails, which I think is interesting to talk about as far as how those values relate to the trend line here, I do want to bring back up our month by month chart because this, I think, is something really interesting as far as the behaviors of comic book purchases out there in the market. Now, of course, you got to take all of this stuff with a grain of salt. This is just the last 5 years, and we're specifically talking about Silver Age purchases here. Well, our graph here in 2022, which is the orange color, is starting to look fairly similar to kind of what we saw in 2021, where once we got to that kind of April, May month, we were on a steady decrease over the course of the next, couple months or so. But one of the things I think is interesting, and why my theory is that, past November, which I think is going to be the low month, and maybe a little bit into December, I think that that is going to be where we start to turn the corner. And one of the reasons I think that is the case is that if you look at the historical performance of Silver Age sales throughout the months, November typically is sort of a down month in proportion to October. And then December actually ends up being a pretty big buying month for a lot of comic book collectors overall. And I think, a lot of the anecdotal theory that people always say is that, oh, people don't spend money in December because, people are doing holidays, they're spending more money on Christmas presents, et cetera, et cetera. Well, as far as this index is concerned, that is actually not what the data shows me. In fact, it seems to be that December is one of the big months for comic book purchases. And again, my working theory as to why that might be the case is I do think that there might be people who are looking to, spend money on comic books for, write-off purposes, or, maybe people are thinking, hey, it's the end of the year. This is a good time to kind of evaluate, what my yearly budget was and make that big purchase. So I think that people, especially in this kind of niche hobby, might be incentivized to purchase things in December, and that could be why that is a month that performs typically pretty well. So this is one of the reasons why I think that after we hit the low of November, my theory is that December will start to trend back upwards, but of course I could be wrong. Generally speaking, this is how I've been kind of evaluating my projections overall going back to 2018. We've typically seen that the Silver Age performs at 15 to 20% year over year return, the Bronze Age at a 15% kind of year over year return. Now, I know you guys have mentioned before that, there's no way it's possible that comic books can accurately, perform 15 to 20% year over year. But you have to understand that this is like on paper how they have performed, where we're talking about, good fair market values that people are able to find at GPA prices, and how they would have done if they're able to get a book at that good fair market value and be able to hold it. And these are like the top 100 blue chip keys in these respective ages. So, we're not talking about a formula that you could just go to eBay and then buy these 100 books at fair market value. We all know that that's not actually how it works. But if you were able to do it kind of in a vacuum, yeah, you may be able to sort of return this percentage overall. So these are kind of the working theories. Again, the projection is that our index values for Silver Age should be between 52,000 to 57,000. And then for the Bronze Age, the index value should be at that sort of 49,000, we'll call it $50,000 range. So if we kind of take a look at the trend lines here, we are starting to see that we are definitely really, really close back to the trend line. I think we probably are still on the higher side for the index for the Silver Age. I do think that next month will be another down month for November, which should put us right back in trend. And then, I think December, we can start to see kind of, an upward motion for our value. Now, that is not to say that that is exactly what's going to happen. I mean, we've seen moments in the past in 2019 and 2020 where there have been, multiple months in a row where the comic book index was performing below the trend line. That is definitely a possibility. And given that, we're kind of in the current economic state that we are, it is very possible and maybe also very likely that, the comic book market can kind of enter that despair mode where there is continued like capitulation and people are continuing to undercut and sell at lower prices overall. And that could be the case for the next few months or so. But if that is the case, I would suspect that at a certain point, we're going to kind of have that rocket pack once again, and very, very quickly kind of correct ourselves back to the trend line overall. And again, like I said, with the kind of key takeaways, just because the overall index is going down doesn't mean that all book values are going down. So, my theory with the Silver Age is when you're out there and you're looking, I still think that, if you see a good deal, if you see a good opportunity, a good price is a good price, especially if it kind of falls in line to the trend where you see sort of what it's selling for in 2020, you do the math for yourself and you have that opportunity to buy it at that price, you probably should do it, because as we all know, it's not that every day you're going to have the opportunity to buy some of those Silver Age books. Now, the Bronze Age as well, I think is going to fall into the trend line eventually, still has a little bit of room to grow. This is one where you may be able to use a little more patience overall, because like I said, the census is such that you will have more opportunities typically to be able to find those books because there are so many being sold out there in the market. So for the Silver Age, in my opinion, I think if you have the deal in front of you and it kind of fits within the numbers, I think it might be worth pulling the trigger if you're somebody who is ready to make that purchase. For the Bronze Age, if you want to wait, you can definitely wait, till we get till December to see where values are, and then you can kind of make your decision from there. But again, this is just kind of showing you some data, showing you some trends in order to make better purchasing decisions. Now, before I wrap up the video, I did want to talk about a couple, kind of mega grails and how they relate to sort of the trends that we've kind of been seeing, because, in my index, index, although it is the top 100 sort of, blue chip keys, I did exclude sort of the mega grails. We're talking about AF15, X-Men 1, Fantastic Four #1. Some of those books that are a little bit harder to chart, and the value ranges are so high that it would completely sway the other 100, books that are in that market. I mean, if I were to include This Amazing Fantasy 15, that would be half of the value or a third of the value of the index automatically. But what I do think is interesting is to take a look at some of these, couple sales that happened just recently here on Heritage in the month of October. We had this AF15 go for $36,000 at the 4.0 range, and this X-Men 1 at the 2.0 range go for $6,300. And what you'll actually notice is that both of these books are actually kind of adjusting back to the trend line as well. Still higher than that of 2020, but kind of returning that sort of 15 to 20% year over year return that you would kind of expect from them. And so that's kind of what I think is really interesting. When we think about sort of the data that we're looking at with the Silver Age Index and even the Bronze Age Index for the most part, is that, no book is immune to this as far as like the mega keys are concerned. Even the AF15s will all sort of get back into trend. At least that's the working theory going into 2023. But I did think that that was very interesting because I was wondering to myself if the mega grails would be immune from this correction. And it's looking like even the top ones out there, like the AF15s, are definitely going to come back down in line. Anyways, that's all for this video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this one. Hopefully you guys find this helpful. Drop me a like, comment, subscribe if you're enjoying the content. Let me know what you guys think, and I will see you in the next one.